Hello and welcome to episode 3 of My Passion Case. I am your host, Bill Huffman, and on this week's show, we will be wrapping up my conversation with producer and reporter Maggie Freleng about the Long Island serial killer, aka the Gilgo Beach murders. As I mentioned last week, all true crime fanatics know about this case. But if you don't and have not listened to part 1 of my conversation with Maggie, please go back and listen, or you'll be quite lost in this episode. So the true crime community and the families of the victims have renewed hope that this case will actually be solved, because for the first time in a long time, a press conference was held to show off new evidence in relation to the case. The Suffolk County Police released pictures of a belt that was found at one of the crime scenes, and the reason why this piece of evidence could be significant is the initials WH or HW were painted on the belt. Now, they said they had the belt in their possession for more than a decade after it was found with one of the bodies. I'm not sure why they didn't release it earlier, but it's released now, so I put a picture up on the website. But since it didn't belong to any of the victims, police said they were confident the belt was handled by the killer. And of course, they didn't say how they were so sure that it was handled by the killer, so we can only speculate. Police don't seem to like to use the word cold case anymore, but I will say that this case was as cold as ice. There really hadn't been any new information in years other than the lawsuits that you had heard about in the trailer. But I will admit, this time does feel like they're giving it a full court press to solve the case. They've gone as far as creating a new website, gilgonews.com, so the public can actually submit information or tips. Just a refresher, the first set of remains were discovered in 2010, while police were searching for another woman, 24-year-old Shannon Gilbert. When they did discover Gilbert's body, the total number was 11. And in a rather callous way of explaining the deaths, police said at the time that most of the women worked in prostitution, so it was basically the job that had killed them. The first autopsy on Gilbert had concluded that she died from drowning and drug overdose, despite the fact there being only 18 inches of water in the area at the time. So the family brought in the famous Dr. Michael Bowden to perform an independent autopsy on Gilbert's body. Now, he was able to determine that she was killed due to homicidal strangulation because the hyoid bone was actually missing. The autopsy showed that Shannon did not die from a drug overdose or drowning. The family of Shannon Gilbert fought the police for more information about their daughter's death, but were seemingly stonewalled by the Suffolk County Police. So the family hired the charismatic attorney John Ray to represent anything to do with Shannon. He was always suing somebody to get more information. This is something crazy to note, but Mary Gilbert, Shannon's mom, actually ended up being murdered by her youngest daughter. This is just another tragic set of circumstances for a family already torn apart from a murder. But apparently Gilbert, Shannon Gilbert that is, had a 21-minute conversation or call with a 911 dispatcher on the night that she disappeared, and the attorney had sued for a release of the tapes. And it was during that search for Shannon, when they found the 4 bodies, that had obviously been dumped there by a killer or a serial killer of some sort. As Maggie said in part 1, the demographics of the area are very wide-ranging, and the terrain is mostly barren. So police found more bodies on Gilgo Beach, which is on the opposite side of Oak Beach. So for whatever reason, and again, I'm not sure why, but the FBI was not involved with this case until the last 5 years. So some of these new leads actually may be driven by their inclusion into this case. But now that I've run you through the basics, let's rejoin my conversation with producer and true crime star Maggie Freleng and take a final look at the Long Island serial killer. Yeah, it doesn't look like it would be very difficult to, if you know the spot, you know the area where you want to take these bodies, pick them up in the city or in any of the boroughs, and just, boom, have your way with them. Like, I mean, not to, like, be so blunt about it, but it's true. I mean, this is the boonies.
Both of these spots specifically, there's a lot of places that aren't the boonies very close by, but this person knew the spots that were.
Everywhere is not the boonies, except for this whole stretch.
This stretch, and then the Pine Barrens out in Manorville.
Yeah.
Like it's quite remote, and there were 2 torsos found there linked to body parts, skulls and feet and hands found, on Ocean Parkway.
Can make a song out of that, like skulls and feet, hands.
I also pluralized feet. I said feet.
I don't know. You might have done that, but whatever. It's a podcast.
But yeah, so yeah, I do think James Burke, Suffolk County Police Chief, he would know all the areas. He is known to be with sex workers. He allegedly was rough with sex workers. Who carries around a bag of porn and sex toys? I mean, listen, there's nothing wrong with porn and sex toys, but I don't know who's carrying that around with them, like in their car.
Hey, each his own. I mean, porn and sex toys, nothing wrong with that.
Okay, fine. You're carrying around your car. Then he beats the guy who steals it and does 46 months in federal prison. I mean, the guy's a little unhinged. I think I would put my money on him.
So he's your number one suspect.
He is. There's other thing, he was known to be, I think, somewhat corrupt. I don't remember exact incidences. There have been some police brutality situations. But yeah, I mean, if you Google him, he comes up as scandal, police brutality. He wasn't the greatest guy, and he's the chief of police.
Is he still the chief of police?
No. It's a different person now. So yeah, the family is still calling for the FBI to get involved.
And they haven't?
No, I don't know exactly. I don't believe the FBI has. The latest thing that I know, the latest with the case, is actually very recent, and Shannon Gilbert's family is still trying to get the 911 call. They want to hear it. They want to hear her 911 call. I believe it was a 20-minute phone call. It's a pretty long phone call. And so while the police have said that they don't believe her case is Lisk related, they also are saying they won't release it because it could jeopardize the identity of the killer. So they kind of contradict themselves, or like hinder the investigation into who the killer is, I think is what they said. And it's like, okay, wait, on one hand, you're saying there was no killer, that she probably drowned, but you're also saying that if you release the phone call, it could hinder the investigation into the killer. So that's the latest, is that they're not releasing the 911 call, and the family is confused as to their reasoning.
Yeah, I mean, when you see it, it's like, I mean, they're basically saying, yeah, the judge says that we can release this, but we're not going to.
Right. You jeopardize the investigation. Yeah. So the other person who actually hasn't been mentioned so far in any of the mainstream, because the main documentary was put out in 2015 or 16, and then the book came out in 2013, almost right after the bodies were found. So no large media has been done since then on the case, is John Bittrolff. And this man was convicted in 2017, so that's why he hasn't been, in any of these major Long Island serial killer documentaries and stuff. He was convicted in 2017 of 2 sex worker deaths in the 90s. And he used to live in the Pine Barrens, where 2 of the torsos were found. So a lot of people think he is a suspect.
Interesting. So there's basically like a top 5.
I pretty much named the top people that are always mentioned. But again, like I said, Bittrolff has not been mentioned as much yet because he was just arrested and convicted. So yeah, he's not as much has been written about him, but when you search him, his top things are Long Island serial killer. Could he be the killer?
Now, do you believe that he's the most likely of the suspects?
I don't know yet, because I haven't really, looked into what he's been up to for all of these years and things like that, which I'm sure the police are currently working on. But he did kill 2 sex workers. He lived in the Pine Barrens. 2 torsos were found there. Maybe he's the torso killer and the trophy killer with the Gilgo Beach 4. Maybe that's, Chief of Police James Burke. It could be two of them.
Yeah.
Because James Burke seems to me more the kind of guy who is, meticulous, planned police guy, and Bittrolff seems more of the kind of guy who's, the kind of serial killer that we think of, this person who's just chopping up bodies and it's like leaving them out there.
So this is kind of an out there question, but is there any chance that they would know each other?
No, that is a good question. I am not sure of.
Just because I'm just saying, if one's going to cover for the other, or they have such different MOs, but they use the same dumping ground area or somewhat of the same dumping ground area. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
Oh, this is interesting. Okay, so now I'm looking more into him. And so a link between him and the Long Island serial killer cases, besides, the bodies found where some of the torsos found where he lived. One of the women he was convicted of killing was reportedly best friends with Melissa Bartholomew, who was one of the Go-Go Beach Four. And apparently Bartholomew's mom said that she had a lot of calls to Manorville from her phone at the time. And this guy, he's not bad looking. He seems kind of like what you think of a serial killer looks like. Looks a little like demure, probably charming.
Yeah, just get you comfortable quickly.
Yeah, he would have been in the age range. Back then he would have been early 40s. They thought this person had been killing since the 90s, and I think his first victim was in the 90s. Yeah, span of crimes 93 to 94. It's definitely interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's like, with any of these criminals that they come across like later in life, or they get caught doing something, past the point of, let's say, being their first opportunity to do so, it just leaves so many unanswered questions as far as who else could have been a victim of, fill in the blank, because it's almost everybody.
Absolutely. And I think, one of the interesting things is there is a kid, an unidentified kid. Perhaps this was his daughter, like similarly in what we saw with the Allenstown Four, where he had to get rid of some of these like loose ends, some of these like I think one of the girls in the barrel was his daughter. People are like, is the kid that was found this person's daughter he had to get rid of? So maybe, identifying her and Asian male and the other Jane Doe, could they be related to him? Or, finding out who some of these people are could lead to who the killer is. And I think that's only going to come with, DNA testing.
Yeah, I definitely think that the Asian male is definitely one of those situations where that was probably he was probably picked up thinking he was a woman and killed because he wasn't.
Yeah.
But either way, he was going to end up dead. I mean, not to be a dick, but like.
Oh, yeah. Well, he was going to, whoever he was picking up, he was killing. So, yeah. This is one of those things that I think about all the time. I always go out there and I'm like, are there more bodies out here? Why is no one looking for more bodies? They should be looking for bodies all the time. I'm always like, what if my parents moved into that house?
I hope you're not like wandering around out there just by yourself, just in a daydream, just going, gosh, where are the bodies? And then you trip over one and you're like, oh, shit.
That would be like a dream though. Like one, to like help find somebody's like missing loved one, just because you're like following up on your like stupid morbid fascination with serial killers. You know what I mean? Like that would be like my dream, is to find a missing loved one. No, but I think, with this case, I do think it's solvable. I think they're going to solve it. I think they have a good amount of evidence that we either don't know of, or, maybe there is something on that 911 call. Maybe they do have some DNA we don't know of. They did do, we're not talking about the early 2000s. These women all went missing in 2010. I mean, cell phone pings, stuff like that. I think it's very solvable, and I think it will be solved soon. And I think, with a shitbag behind bars now, Bittrolff, I think maybe some plea deals. I don't know.
Yeah, once you put the feet to the fire, it's one of those things, kind of get a lot of answers. Now, here's a quick question before we wrap things up. What do you think there's any connection between the bodies that were found in Atlantic City,
right,
and all these, because just to give a quick rundown to the listener, 4 bodies were found behind a hotel motel, a seedy, we'll say a seedy motel. But I forget what year it was. Again, 4 bodies. They weren't all killed at the same time.
And were they, I forget, remind me, were they found at the same time?
They were found at the same time. I do remember that. I'm going to double
Right,
check.
and they were similar to the Yogo Beach Four because there was 4 of them laid out very similarly, all sex
Right.
workers in Atlantic City, which is also very close to New York City, as Oak Beach and Yogo Beach were.
Oh, they give him a name on Wikipedia. They call him the Eastbound Strangler. But yeah, 4 prostitutes found in a drainage ditch behind a Golden Key Motel.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I mean, the documentary, the A&E documentary, they mention it. They bring it up as, possibly connected. That's the only time I've heard that. I don't think they were mentioned in Lost Girls. Is that where you were hearing, where
No,
you
no,
remember it?
it was just I personally just I have a
I mean, it's interesting. It's a very similar like MO, like a trophy garden, like laying them out like that. I don't believe they were buried though.
no, they weren't.
Yeah.
But they were like, again, they were all strangled and laid out. But no, again, the only reason I bring it up is because of the fact that I recall it as just being a news guy.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely interesting, and I
Super
would
interesting.
if I was law enforcement, I would look at them as possibly connected. It's a close enough area. It's a similar situation. The guy, if he's working in Times Square, he could also be going out to Atlantic City to be with sex workers. I mean, people who live on Long Island gamble in Atlantic City.
Yeah, and it's not like you're stuck to one spot. I mean, if you're just like getting away with murder, who the hell's this? Like, you don't have to. I mean, look at Bundy. Bundy was all over the freaking country doing his crimes. You don't
I mean,
have to
so
be
was
in one
Israel Key.
spot. Yeah, Israel Keys, exactly.
If the Long Island serial killer, if the torso killings and the trophy killings are all the same person, it would make the Long Island serial killer one of the most prolific serial killers, who is one of the most prolific serial killers, also terrifyingly still at large.
That's a scary thought. And
Right? Because
actually,
usually we find out these guys are serial killers after they're caught, and this one, it's like Bundy gets caught for something, and then we find out about all the bodies. Or Israel Keys, he gets caught on one murder, and we find out about, I forget, with him, 5 others, I think, with him. This one, we find all the bodies, many of the bodies before the person's caught.
yeah. I mean, he's definitely out there. I mean, he's got to know that at least. I mean, 48 Hours, Dateline, podcasts, you name it. I mean, they've covered him. So if he's out there still and alive, then he's well aware of the coverage he's getting. So I don't know if that's going to lead to him stopping what he's doing, but certainly is weird to be kind of living through it.
Right? I know. And I feel like I've grown up with it, and I'm just like, wow, that's going to be the day they catch him. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I'll say the same thing about Amy. I mean, I've
Yeah.
since I was 10. I mean, I grew up in the city next door, and it's been something that has been just ingrained in our brains since we were young. So the day that that's solved is the same type of feeling that you'll have when this is solved. And I just think that, I think doing shows like this and, the work that you do and the shows that you do, it's important for the listeners to really understand and take a deeper dive into who the people are that these crimes are being committed against, and remember that like there is no solution, there is no closure for any of these families, and that closure is not the right word, because I know better than to say that, but it's just we're
Yeah.
living through it right now. It'd
Yeah.
be like living through the Night Stalker or living through the Golden State Killer, But again, they still didn't know that those things were connected at the time. We
Right.
now have the ability to be able to make those conclusions.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. It's pretty crazy.
So yeah. So anyway, we'll wrap things up. And what's your final thoughts on where you see the case going, and what's your hope for I guess the immediate future?
I see it going similar to how Golden State Killer went. It, for most people, it's kind of disappeared. People kind of forget about it. A lot of people didn't even have the name until Michelle's book came out. And then suddenly it's like breaking news, this random guy is arrested. I kind of see it happening like that. It kind of goes dormant. People start to forget about it unless you're me and you're like a creep every single day. And then like suddenly it's like this breaking national news, like prolific serial killer who's been killing since the 90s is finally arrested. I kind of see it going like that.
Oh, that'd be a nice conclusion. I
Right?
wouldn't argue with you on that one.
I
And
hope. I hope. I think it's a new world with DNA, and I think it's unclear to me if he had sex and or raped or sexually assaulted any of the women, but I would, for the sake of DNA, hope there is DNA.
And as far as just your overall feeling on the authorities' perspective on the case and how seriously they're handling everything, is this something that you feel like they're all? I know that sometimes when it's a sex worker or there's been situations where families feel like they're kind of getting the short end of the stick on some of the services that the police provide because of the job. Do you feel like that's been any bit of a impact as far as the case goes?
I think that the families feel like that, at least, that they've been given the short end of the stick. I don't personally know. I think, and I would hope now with a new chief of police, I believe that all happened in 2016. It's been a couple years, the new chief of police. I would hope that it's moving forward. I mean, if the police have said and think this is one person, you have a very serious problem. You either have two problems or one very serious problem, because there's 10 bodies that we know of linked to this person then. So I would hope that they are taking it quite seriously.
And you're convinced that now, just to verify, one killer, two killers?
I think Shannon Gilbert did die by a homicide. And whether that was linked to this killer or it's a insane coincidence that she was strangled and put out in the marsh. And I say strangled because the bone that they were not able to find that would have shown if she was strangled or not was the hyoid bone, and that's incredibly small, and that's usually what breaks in strangulation. They couldn't find that bone, which is why it's undetermined how she died. But then I believe the family's independent expert did conclude they believe it was strangulation. So I think she was murdered. And I don't know who that was. I don't know if it was Lisk. I don't know if it was someone she was running from that night. But I do think that it is two. I think it's one person. I would say it's one person. And then I think about it again, and I'm like, maybe it's two people. I don't know. I don't think Shannon Gilbert died by the Long Island serial killer. I do think Shannon Gilbert was killed. I don't know for sure if it's one or two killers. I go back and forth on it all the time.
Well, I get it. And I really, really do appreciate you taking the time on this evening to discuss this case, because you obviously have a lot of passion for it, and definitely one that we all agree, I think, that can be solved, but until that day comes.
Yeah. I thank you for letting me rant about it and not bother my friends with it anymore. Or I will be, but just not tonight.
No problem at all. I'm happy to give you a platform to do so. And
Awesome.
again, thank you so much for joining me. And
Awesome. Well, I'll see you, I guess, in a month or two.
Sounds like a plan.
All right.
All right. You take care, Maggie. I appreciate
Bye,
it.
Bill. Thank you.
You bet. Take care. Thank you so much again to Maggie from Missing Maura Murray, NPR Latino USA, Crawl Space, and basically everything true crime. And thank you, the listener, for tuning into my new show, My Passion Case. As I mentioned before, I will be dropping new episodes every Monday, wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And now, if you enjoy My Passion Case, you can support the show by clicking on the donate button on the right-hand side of slowburnmedia.com. That is slow minus the W. Or via the Venmo app with my username at Bill-Huffman-3. And I will also provide a link in the show notes. Any amount is appreciated, and it really does help keep the podcast running. I will also be representing Who Killed and My Passion Case on Podcast Row at CrimeCon 2020 in Orlando, May 1st through the 3rd. I really look forward to talking with the listeners about the cases that I've covered. And again, if you enjoy this podcast, if you could leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your favorite shows, that would be great, because that does help keep the cases I do cover in the spotlight. Again, I'll be dropping all my new episodes on Mondays, and I will also be dropping new episodes of Who Killed on Fridays. If you'd like to stay up to date on the cases that I have covered, as well as the new shows I have in the pipeline, please follow me on Twitter at BillHuffman3. Thank you again so much for listening, and until next time, be safe.